Welcome to People, Power, and Politics. Hard talk, riveting interviews, community updates, in-depth analysis. That's People, Power, and Politics. We tell it to you as it is. No holds barred. You are the people. You have the power. We bring you the politics. To listen to our podcast, be a guest, or to advertise, visit www.pppradio.nyc. That's www.pppradio.nyc.
Governor Hochul signs legislation to protect survivors, hold perpetrators accountable for rape. Governor Kathy Hochul on January 30 signed legislation to modernize New York state law to protect survivors of rape and hold perpetrators accountable for sexual assault. The legislation, S. 3161/A3340, Rape is Rape Bill, updates the definition of rape in the Penal Code to ensure that additional forms of nonconsensual, forced sexual conduct can be prosecuted as rape. The Rape is Rape Act is sponsored by Assemblymember Catalina Cruz and State Senator Brad Hoylman-Sigel. Here is the governor.
Today is about the survivors. It's about aligning the letter of the law with the pain in their hearts. It's about calling out violent, horrific acts for what they are, so survivors can reclaim their power and dignity. And it's about backing them with the full force of our justice system, so those who commit rape are charged accordingly. In a few moments, we'll put to rest a decade-long debate to determine what legally constitutes rape in the state of New York. And so many people fought to get us here. And I want to acknowledge them. Senator Brad Hoylman-Sigel, our bill sponsor. Thank you, Senator. Thank you. Assemblymember Catalina Cruz, the Assembly sponsor. Former Assemblymember Arevalo Samotis, who was the original bill sponsor. Thank you. John Watson, the Acting Director of the Office of Victim Services. Thank you, John, for all your work on this. And Kelly Owens, the Executive Director of the Office of Prevention of Domestic Violence. You know, you open up the newspapers, if you actually open up newspapers or see it on your digital device. But I couldn't help but notice a recurring theme in the headlines. Influential men abusing their positions of power to inflict pain on women. And despite our incredible strides as society, powerful men are still able to commit despicable acts on women, often with impunity. From leaders in business, from those from the highest levels of government. And though she couldn't be with us here today, I want to take a moment to recognize E. Jean Carroll for her courageous efforts to make sure justice was done, and to bring a case against the former president whose defamatory and disgusting statements exacerbated a horrific situation. Now, as the first woman governor of the state of New York, it's been my mission since day one to enact stronger protections for women in every walk of life. We've made New York a safe harbor for abortion, strengthened laws that take guns away from abusers, rooted out the culture of harassment in these hallowed halls of this very building, and cleared the way for adult survivors to hold their abusers accountable. That mission continues today. Roughly 90% of rape survivors are women, but the problem is rape is very difficult to prosecute. That's because New York's archaic laws define rape in very narrow terms. Physical technicalities confuse jurors and humiliate survivors and create a legal gray area that defendants exploit. You take the case of a woman, Lydia Cuomo, a woman who deserves incredible credit for jump-starting the conversation about the need to update our laws. More than a decade ago, she watched in shock as her case played out in court. Jurors struggled to square her account of what happened to her with New York's high legal threshold for rape. They are hung up on trivial details, like she couldn't recall the color of a car that was parked outside. Therefore, she must not be able to recall what happened to her during this so-called rape. This is what she had to endure. She was raped at gunpoint. But given the existing language of law, that's all she had. And I want to tell you what she said. She said, "Right is right. He raped me, and at the end of the day, he's not being called a rapist. He is a rapist, and you need to call rape, rape." She said those acts now follow under the description of a sexual assault, which she had to endure. And she said it's erroneous because it makes it sound like the attack isn't so bad. She said there's nothing sexual about it. It was an act of violence. And she wanted to make sure that forced anal and oral sex be classified as rape under the law. Lydia took too many years. Lydia's since moved away. This article was written in 2013. Think of all the cases where women like Lydia had to go into court with the law as it was written, despite the horrific acts that occurred to them, whether it's gunpoint in a parking lot or in a workplace setting. It doesn't matter. These women did not receive justice for all this time because of the way the law was written. And now, we will say, despite what happened then, that yes, there was an attack, yes, it was horrible, but it wasn't raped. Because rape carries a certain weight to it. It gives survivors a way to describe what happened to them. Naming it is the first step to confronting it. And confronting it is how you eventually move forward and take back your power. On the flip side, if we refuse to call something what it is, we as society refuse to say rape is rape, we invalidate the survivors, trivialize their pain, and ultimately intensify their trauma. That somehow what they went through is less serious. It's time to right this wrong. Today I'm signing a bill that broadens the definition of rape to include additional forms of sexual violence. These are acts we would commonly accept as rape, but until now have fallen outside the legal definition. And rewriting these laws is also important to the LGBTQ plus community, who've been too long ignored when it comes to prosecution under our New York State rape statutes. Justice denied for too long. Today we're bringing the language of the law in line with what survivors have been forced to endure. We're reassuring survivors that when they walk into a police station or approach the witness stand, the full weight of the law of the state of New York is behind them. It's behind them now going forward. Rape will be treated like the horrific crime that it is. So I'm here today to say the voices have been heard. Reaffirm that justice will be served. And I'm grateful again for all the people who stood up, the advocates, the survivors, often having to repeat what they experienced. It's painful. It's so painful. We want them to know they've been heard. Their voices have been heard in the halls of this Capitol, finally, after over a decade of waiting. And I want to thank our advocates. Former Assembly Member Arabella Simotis, thank you. Thank you for starting the conversation again. Assemblywoman Catalina Cruz, thank you again for carrying on the fight. Again, incredible leaders. And our Senate sponsor, I want to have you hear from his own words what this means to him. Senator Brad Hoylman-Siegel. Thank you, Senator.
Good morning. Such an honor to be here, Governor. And I don't think it's a coincidence that this bill is being signed today under the leadership of a woman, under the leadership of a woman governor, 2 women legislators who championed this bill, and a woman who leads the Senate majority, as my colleague Senator Fernandez knows so well. I want to thank those colleagues for their efforts. Assemblywoman Simotas, for 8 years in the trenches trying to get this bill passed, and of course Assemblymember Cruz for the last 3 years championing it, and now achieving success. Those women would not take no for an answer. At times, it seemed like the Senate wouldn't take yes for an answer, but we got there today. And I truly want to thank also Majority Leader Andrew Stewart-Cousins for making this bill a priority in the Senate. I want to extend my deep gratitude to the survivors who are here and the Coalition Against Sexual Assault. We indeed stand on your shoulders. And of course, we all remember just 2 years ago, Governor, when you signed the Adult Survivors Act in this very location, opening the door for thousands of New Yorkers to seek justice, including, as you mentioned, E. Jean Carroll. And there are 83.3 million reasons why we understand how deep the caustic effect of sexual assault and violence is in our society. Today, we make it easier for victims to hold rapists accountable and make it clear that in the state of New York, sexual assault of any kind will not be tolerated. We have worked hard in New York to make our state a beacon of justice for victims of sexual harassment and assault. And though there will always be more work to be done, today we take an important step forward as we make it crystal clear in New York that rape is rape. And the law is finally going to reflect that. Prior to the legislation being signed by the governor today, sexual assault could only be considered rape in a very narrow set of circumstances that depended on those narrow set of circumstances. This outdated definition is not only heteronormative and offensive, it simply wasn't true. We can't have our laws ignore the reality that so many New Yorkers, particularly LGBTQ New Yorkers among others, have experienced. In our community, the LGBT community, people experience sexual assault and rape at disturbingly high rates. Studies have shown that nearly half of transgender people in this country are sexually assaulted, nearly half, at some point in their lives. The numbers are similar for bisexual women and gay men. But before today, many of those assaults wouldn't be able to be classified as rape in New York State if the genitalia of the attacker and the victim didn't exactly line up with that was in our old legal language. But now we fix that language. And with today's changes, our penal law has been updated by removing the requirements that were so outdated and expanding the definition to include various types of unwanted sexual conduct, not just the kind of sexual conduct heterosexual people engage in. We now have eliminated the crime of criminal sexual act, how these assaults are currently categorized in the law to recognize that rape is rape no matter the form. Our law now finally reflects the reality that sexual assault can happen in a number of ways and anyone can be a victim. Again, thank you, Governor, for signing this bill into law. It is such an honor to be under the leadership of such strong women in this Capitol. Thank you. And now, one of those strong women who shepherded the bill over the last 3 years through the Assembly and would not take no for an answer, Assemblywoman Catalina Cruz.
Good morning, everyone. The subject matter of this bill signing may be uncomfortable to listen to and to talk about, but I implore you to consider what victims have been forced to endure due to the past failure of the change in this law. For decades, survivors who already struggled to come to terms with what has happened to them have been told that the horrible criminal acts committed against them are now statutorily categorized as rape. This is because our state's current law is enshrined in outdated, gendered notions of rape. And instead of, it creates various categories of sexual assault for what is clearly rape. Imagine suffering the worst attack of your life, raped orally and or anally, your bodily integrity violated, resulting in your life never being the same again. But because there was no vaginal penetration, see Kenny, vaginal penetration. This is an internal joke. When I get nervous, I can't pronounce that word. So, and let me tell you, 3 years of debate on this bill can make you very nervous. The law does not recognize the forcible sexual acts of rape, and our law failed to understand the reality of sexual assault, the reality of violence, the reality that our law has failed survivors. Forced sexual contact against your will, whether it involves vagina, anus, or mouth, is an absolute violation of self and your trust, and calling it anything other than rape negates what we as survivors have endured. This insufficient and discriminatory narrative also leaves out victims of male on male, female on female attacks, often resulting in failure to prosecute the rapes committed upon members of our LGBT community. But today, rape is rape becomes law, and it is more than just a simple change in words. It's a systematic shift on how we think about who is a rape victim and who is a rapist. Survivors like Lydia Cuomo, who I've had the honor of getting to know over the last 3 years, and who unfortunately couldn't be with us today, are the reason why we've done this work. Back in 2011, when she was brutally raped by an off-duty police officer on her way to her first day as a teacher, he was convicted of predatory sexual assault and not rape because the jury couldn't agree if there was vaginal penetration. Think about having to be Lydia. Think about having to be in a courtroom to be told that what happened to you was not rape. I also want to thank former Assemblymember Arabella Simotas, who saw the injustice in Lydia's case and embarked on a journey to change the law. She introduced Rape is Rape, and I have to tell you, one of the most prolific litigators I've ever had the pleasure of getting to know. The debates on that floor over that decade were something to watch. And it was an honor when she asked me after she left the assembly to take over the bill. Thank you for letting me carry it to the finish line. I'm also grateful to Speaker Hasty, who year after year prioritized this bill, generally early on in the session, because he knew that our law was failing survivors. And he stood with survivors and continues to do so because he knows that they deserve the justice. I also want to thank my colleagues who not only voted for year after year, but who were my support system. Because as a survivor, it was a very difficult task to get up on that floor and have to explain to people why what happened to us had to be recognized as rape. And it was my colleagues and my team who kept me sometimes laughing just to make it through. And so for that, I am thankful to you. I'm also very thankful to my team, to my chief of staff, because without the women in our life, we don't get to do this work. And Governor Hochul, I want to thank you and your team, because we work all through the holidays and people said the things that they wanted to say. But we were working behind closed doors with your team all throughout the holidays so that we could get this right, so that victims of rape could be seen as such. And taking this swift action to sign the bill as soon as it would pass is something that we are eternally grateful for. I also want to thank your team, because those countless hours that they spend are going to ensure that when prosecutors are looking at a case of rape, they're able to charge it as such, and they're able to get the conviction and the justice that victims deserve. And I am eternally grateful to my partner in this, Senator Hochul, for getting it passed through the Senate. He jokingly said, we finally got it through. But it was frustrating. We would often have the conversations on the back end about how difficult this was, and you didn't give up, and your team didn't give up, and for that, I thank you. And I want to express special debt of gratitude to the New York State Coalition of Sexual Assault, especially Safe Horizon and their team, for their steadfast dedication to survivors. Every time I called for your help, you were right there to get it done. You always fought for the right of the survivors, no matter the politics, no matter how difficult it seemed. And lastly, I want to thank survivors, the ones who work in these very halls, the ones who expressed support, the ones who lobbied to pass the bill. I see you. You gave me the strength year after year to get up on the floor of the assembly and explain why what happened to us was rape. And to anyone here and to anyone who is watching us, if you are a survivor of rape, know that you are not alone. There are resources to help you to begin healing and to seek justice. You can start by doing what I did, which was call Safe Horizon at their hotline on 800-799-7233. I needed to put that at the end because when I was at the end of my rope, it was Safe Horizon that saved my life. And we are here to give survivors the resources so that they can do the same and that they can seek the justice that for decades they couldn't get. And so once we sign, the law changes, and now rape will be known as rape. Thank you.
People, Power, and Politics. Hard talk, riveting interviews, community updates, in-depth analysis. That's People, Power, and Politics. We tell it to you as it is. No holds barred. You are the people, you have the power. We bring you the politics. To listen to our show, be a guest, or to advertise, visit www.pppradio.nyc. That's www.pppradio.nyc.